And today, welcome to Dr. Mike Howard from Texas A&M University. Welcome, Dr. Howard.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Dr. Howard is joining us today. He has interests in social networks, the development of complex technologies, and social embeddedness at individual and organizational levels. His education includes a Bachelor and Master's of Business Administration at the University of Illinois. And he earned a Master of Science in Business Administration and a PhD in Technology Entrepreneurship and Strategic Management, that is, at the Foster School of Business at the University of Washington. So welcome once again. Glad that you're here with us.
Glad to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. So what first interested you in the field of entrepreneurship scholarship?
Yeah, so prior to my academic career, I did spend some time in industry, and this is not uncommon. There are other scholars in our field who may have had kind of an industry background, and maybe similar to them, I observed certain phenomena in my industry experience that just led to certain questions. And at the time, I just sort of puzzled about what was going on in those observations without really having a theoretical framework or any sort of analytical way to understand it. And so as one example relevant to entrepreneurship, when I worked at Intel, there were a number of individuals, engineers who were very skilled in semiconductor technology and also very well compensated. They had amazing stock options at this time. This is kind of late 90s when that company was really doing extremely well. Mm-hmm. And I noticed that there was a subset of these engineers who would choose to leave the company and pursue entrepreneurship. So that struck me as an interesting decision. There's a tremendous opportunity cost because they were obviously very well compensated and already doing very well within an established, secure company. That the idea that they would risk all of this future revenue source to launch a new company was just fascinating. And so, like I said, at the time, I maybe didn't have the theoretical framework or the analysis to understand what was going on. That's something that stayed in my mind as I launched into my academic career.
Oh, yeah, definitely in the early and later 1990s with Intel, just tremendous growth and still such a strong company. So that definitely sounds like a great reason to get into entrepreneurship and to get launched, to understand that framework. I noticed that in entrepreneurial identity and strategic disclosure, that you talked about founder CEOs and new venture media strategy, which was published in 2020. You and your co-authors studied how new venture leaders craft their media communications. And to do so, you analyzed 76,883 press releases. So where did you source your data from? Why is a venture that retains the founder CEO more likely to reach an IPO?
Yeah, so just to step back for a second, the idea behind this paper was that there's kind of mixed understanding or mixed signals in terms of the benefits of retaining a founder. So there's this notion that they bring a lot of passion to their venture and that they have a strong personal identification with their venture. When we did interviews, they said, yeah, that's my baby. Don't insult my baby, or don't tell me my baby is ugly when you're talking about my venture. So very strong feelings about it. But at the same time, there's definitely advantages to bringing in a skilled CEO who has gone through the process of growing a young company repeatedly, because there's certain things you learn that make you very good at that process. So those kind of mixed signals in our literature, what is better? And that kind of led us into maybe considering this media strategy, this media component as being a potential hinge factor. But you're right, that we had a lot of data on press releases. We started with a core data set from Venture Source, which is a third-party organization that tracks information on venture capital-backed firms. And this sample was in the technology industries. And I was very fortunate to have a visiting student from Hohenheim University in Stuttgart named Johannes Kolb. And he came over and he thought, since he's visiting, maybe we'd generate some sort of collaboration that we could do. And he put in a great deal of work to go through and collect this information on the press releases, to do a text analysis on that. So he cited references in the finance literature that he was familiar with where they had gone through this process. And he thought this would be a good process or good analytical tool to apply to this research question. And it definitely was. And so I credit him with the very intensive work to collect all this information and boil it down into something that we could load into a Stata model and try to test some results. And so that's just a really great collaboration. I continue to work with Hohenheim University with all the great scholars and students that they're developing over there. But in terms of the paper itself, I think we did make a case that at least to some extent, this idea of media strategy or media representation of the venture by the founder is part of the reason why founders are good leading into the IPO process. And that somewhat disentangles this ambiguity that we had in the prior literature. And just as kind of a commentary on what to do with this knowledge for real business application, when we were conducting interviews, we ran into a handful of companies where they tried to retain the benefit of the founder. They would keep the founder closely involved in the board in some visible role. They would represent the company, but they had this professional CEO come in. One founder called it adult supervision. A professional CEO came in and make sure they were managing the business correctly. And those companies did extremely well because they had both benefits, the excellent representation and passion of the founder combined with this critical and different business knowledge that's needed not only not in the startup phase, but in the growth stage where you're really helping your company to take off. So those are some of the key findings, but again, great collaboration, fun to collect that data. I hope Johannes would still agree. So he put a lot of work into that and it just worked out well.
Wow, it's really amazing what we can find out from big data sets these days and what other scholars are able to help us to bring to light for us, and we can put into new applications. And the dual roles then of founder and then a professional CEO, those are just fascinating.
Yep.
In interpersonal relationships, digital technologies, and innovation and entrepreneurial ventures, where that article evaluates knowledge development in new firms, what predictions did you and your co-authors make? And how did your predictions compare to the back test you ran against data from 632 biotech firms?
Yeah, so this was the last installment in a set of studies that I conducted with my co-authors, Arvind Sahim, Sandeep Basu, and Warren Boker. And so one of the broad questions that we were asking throughout all of that work was, what are the sources of new knowledge for a venture? So it's pretty clear, I'm quite convinced from my understanding of the innovation literature that a company really can't rely on the knowledge that it can develop internally. You really must maintain access to external knowledge. And so that begs the question, where do you get that knowledge? What are the best sources of that knowledge? And so one of the interesting components of that is this idea of parent firms. Again, getting back to, you'll see the parallel here to my original observations at Intel. Intel was a parent firm for those individuals who chose to leave and engage in entrepreneurship. I carry that forward into this line of research. So maybe you continue to look at your parent firm, see what kind of innovations they're developing, and that, since you understand that knowledge really well, having worked there, you can build on that going forward. So that's something we figured would be present in our data, and it was. But the really fascinating component in this particular installment of that research was the role of digital technologies and information technologies. We thought there would also be an effect there, the reasoning being that a parent company that has better IT systems or better computer systems in terms of organizing the knowledge that they develop should facilitate easier transfer of knowledge, easier sharing of knowledge. What we were really fascinated by the strength of the interaction between those. So it's really the case that a company coming from a company that has strong IT systems, has well-organized processes for maintaining the knowledge that it develops, could be the source for external knowledge for other ventures. And so thinking in terms of what does this mean in the business world, it might be alarming to the parent company because it shows some aspect of spillover, that they're maybe potentially losing knowledge to this sort of ecosystem of spin-offs that they're generating. But at the same time, the literature also talks about reverse spillover. So maybe it's good that others are using knowledge and building on your ideas, because then you can in turn learn from what they're doing. And it just creates, like I said, kind of a broader ecosystem of learning that's accessible to all the companies that are linked through these sort of parental ties. But yeah, we hadn't looked at this digital aspect before, and that was really kind of a fascinating finding that we hadn't anticipated when we first started that paper.
Yeah, it's really interesting that you can have these parents that have these spinoffs that may actually create a positive synergistic effect then ultimately in the ecosystem, even if there's some time involved in that occurring as the new nascent pathways take off for those firms.
Yeah, absolutely.
You contributed management of innovation and knowledge sharing to the edited work, Strategic Management, State of the Field and Its Future. What do you believe are some of the most promising avenues for new entrepreneurship research? And what might you recommend to a scholar who is new to the field?
Yeah, this was a fun project to just kind of think about where we're heading. How are we studying innovation and entrepreneurship, and what might the future hold? Normally, the types of articles that we write don't lend themselves to this sort of thing. So I really enjoyed working on this project. And one of the key things that I tried to dive into that's really still resonating in my mind as I think of future projects is the role of automation and artificial intelligence. So we have our knowledge search literature in the innovation field, which looks at the idea of recombinatory knowledge development. So you take knowledge elements that have been developed, in the field, or maybe even outside of your own technology field, and you recombine them in a new and unique way to develop new innovations. That's a pretty fundamental idea of that search literature. But what's interesting to me is that it's almost like, reminds me of my days long ago when I was studying for my engineering degree, this idea of design optimization. If you can take all of the components of whatever you're trying to build or design, and then you sort of run an algorithm which tells you this is the ideal combination of components, that's what you want to do. We're almost getting to the point where, artificial intelligence can recognize patterns. It can assess the value or the utility of a different combination of knowledge components in very sophisticated ways that were not possible in the past. So I'm almost wondering if this component of the search process will be handed over to some extent to computers and to artificial intelligence, and in a way that really creates greater efficiency. So it could help us be more efficient, more innovative, more effective. I think this was applied to some extent in recent efforts to identify treatments for COVID. So we have tremendous amounts of data on people who have taken a variety of different treatments for a variety of different ailments, and they could use database recognition, artificial intelligence to comb through this data and come up with candidates for ways to help with the pandemic. So in the biopharmaceutical space, this was very effective. So that's really interesting. I think understanding the context, understanding the changes of technology, not only in this particular area, but changes in society, the way we link together through networks, that companies really occupy different space than they used to. They used to be more standalone, definitely competing against specific competitors, but now we're so linked together. I would encourage new scholars to think context and think about changes in context and technology and how they could potentially change the nature of competition in the future. And that could lend really interesting insights. And the good thing there is that, established faculty, professors who have been at this a long time, we do tend to get stuck in our own interests and areas, which is fine because we're specializing, we're developing expertise. But maybe you could have a fresh view by pulling in the context in a way that we wouldn't see it, since you have a new take on the field that we can't access anymore. So that's something to think about for someone who's just getting into entrepreneurship.
Right. This coming in, this new to entrepreneurship, and just like you mentioned about scholars in Germany, being able to have that cross-pollination effect that's there, that in the same way that people that are new to the field, people that experience the field. Matter of fact, it even makes me think about your analogy with your stating about the original founder and then the CEO that comes alongside too. That these positive synergistic effects that can take place.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so there's kind of a sub-theme there. As an individual scholar, design your own network creatively. Seek out people who have you want to be able to communicate with others. So you want to have kind of a common understanding of literature, but you also want people that have a variety of perspectives, whether that's cultural, regional, some different discipline that a colleague brings in, because that's really the source. It gets back to that recombinatory view, right? So you recombine knowledge elements in different ways, and you can do that with diversified collaboration teams. So just think about that a little as you start your career.
Right. Oh, it's good information. As we look, and that takes us directly to our last question for today. Since you're also the academic director of Texas A&M's McFerrin Center for Entrepreneurship, what innovations do you see that you find the most exciting? We mentioned about AI, for example, being there. Since a number of universities now offer innovation hubs, how can academic research inform the creation of successful new ventures?
Yeah, so I think about this. So another one of my jobs that when I wear this other hat, I'm the academic director of the McFerrin Center, and I think a lot about what is the right way to pursue the various aspects of knowledge related to entrepreneurship. So we're teaching people entrepreneurship classes, we're researching, we're helping entrepreneurs who may not be enrolled in a bachelor's program or a master's program. They just want to launch a business. And our center is there to help them with the very pragmatic tasks required to do that. And so my thinking at the moment is that the best approach is a seamless integration of these different aspects. So I want to do things that involve students in our academic programs, that involve entrepreneurs, and that reach out to the research community. So we're leveraging data that we're collecting as we work with entrepreneurs. One thing that we're doing is we're pursuing what I would call applied research through our master's program, and that is pairing our master's students with entrepreneurs in the McFerrin Center network who have already successfully launched companies, and our students are working with them. We've got a summer project going right now where they are working with entrepreneurs to write business cases on entrepreneurship. So the students who are writing the case gain insight into entrepreneurship in a way that they wouldn't by just sitting in a classroom. They're helping future classrooms, because this case can then be taught going forward to cover specific areas. And so I'm kind of gently introducing the literature into the project by suggesting themes and research publications on topics that relate to the case study that they're doing, and they learn even more from that. And then the entrepreneurs themselves are energized. They see the value of what we're doing. They love that their stories are being told. And then so they're very supportive of the academic side, which maybe they aren't as familiar with or not as comfortable with as they would have been in the past. So I really think it's the seamless integration, and there's probably a variety of ways to do this. Innovation hubs, incubation programs, those are great. Yeah. And I just think the key is to let's not create artificial boundaries between those activities and research and the academic programs. In the real world, when we do research, for example, comparing macro and micro aspects of management, the management discipline, the real world doesn't care about that. So they're focused on, what's the bottom line of the company, or how are we helping our stakeholders and being responsible citizens, that sort of thing. And they don't put in this unusual, artificial almost division between the two. So I always try to think beyond those kinds of boundaries and do as much integrative work as I can. And I think that's the future of where we're heading, but we will see.
Yeah, for certain. Yeah, which sounds very exciting. Definitely both with McFerrin Center, as well as all kinds of innovation hubs and incubators that are universities across the US and across the world too. It's just a tremendous opportunity for research to really inform the practical aspects of entrepreneurship.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think that's the case.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Howard, for having joined us today to be able to talk about your work with entrepreneurship and to talk about these different cutting edge areas. It's just in a tremendous time to be involved in entrepreneurship research. And it's just really great. Each of the different aspects that you talked about today is just very informative to us. So we really appreciate your time and thank you for having spent time with us today.
Well, I'm very glad to be here, and thank you very much for having me.
Yeah. Well, I hope that you enjoy a great day and that you take care. And thank you once again on behalf of everybody at our summer seminar.
Okay, take care, everyone.